economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Speaker of the People's National Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, has said in Istanbul, Turkey, that the current international context, marked by overlapping crises, requires a reassessment of the foundations of the global system and stronger commitment to justice and peace, highlighting President Abdelmajid Tebboun's vision to strengthen international justice. As Egypt says it will relentlessly work with Pakistan to reach a final agreement between the United States and Iran in the forthcoming days, Tehran has announced that it is regaining full control of the Strait of Hormuz. And in Lebanon, one blue helmet was today killed and 3 others were wounded in an ambush laid in the southern part of the country. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has taken part in the opening ceremony of the 5th edition of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum held in the Turkish resort town. More details with our colleague Mariam Bershi on the topic.
A statement from the Foreign Ministry indicated that the opening ceremony of the forum was presided over by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, adding that this year's edition is held under the theme Shaping the Future and Addressing Uncertainties. It is worth noting that the program of the 5th edition of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum includes a series of workshops and panel discussions dedicated to addressing the prominent international issues and challenges with the participation of government officials, representatives of international organizations, as well as a number of figures from academic and media cycles. On the sideline of his participation in the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Mr. Attaf held bilateral talks with the senior advisor to the President of the United States for African, Arab and Middle Eastern Affairs, Massad Boulos. The meeting focused on the positive momentum marking Algerian-US relations in light of the strategic dialogue between the two countries and the promising prospects offered by the economic partnership. The two sides also exchanged their views on the main issues in the Arab world and the African continent, notably the developments in the situation in Libya and Sudan, as well as the Western Sahara issue. The Algerian Foreign Minister also held talks with Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Mohammad Ishaq Dar, with whom he examined the strong Algeria-Pakistan relations and stressed the need to intensify joint efforts to raise them further. The two sides discussed on the occasion the developments in the Middle East and the Gulf region, with Attaf commending Pakistan's mediation efforts to reach a ceasefire, expressing hope that these efforts will lead to lasting solutions, ensuring long-term security and stability in the region. Later on, Ahmed Attaf met with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Bahram Saleh, whom he congratulated on his appointment and reaffirmed Algeria's support for his mission, and discussed with him cooperation prospects, particularly programs for Sahrawi refugees and growing challenges affecting the UNHCR's capacity to address refugee issues worldwide. The Algerian Foreign Minister also held bilateral talks with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abou Ghait, that mainly focused on the current situation in the Arab world, particularly in the Middle East and the Gulf region. Both sides also reviewed prospects for strengthening joint Arab action to better address the region's growing challenges. Attaf also met with Jordan's Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, Ayman Safadi. The talks allowed reaffirming solidarity with Jordan in light of the repercussions it sustained due to the recent escalation in the Middle East, and underlining the depth of the brotherly ties and cooperation between the two countries and peoples. The two ministers also exchanged views on the regional situation with the context of the ceasefire agreement and expressed hope that negotiations between the parties concerned will lead to definitive settlement of outstanding disputes. They also called on the international community not to ignore the tragic situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, particularly in Gaza, the West Bank, and occupied Al-Quds.
And the Speaker of the People's National Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, has said in Istanbul, Turkey, that the current international context, marked by overlapping crises, requires a reassessment of the foundations of the global system and stronger commitment to justice and peace, highlighting President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's vision to strengthen international justice. In a speech made at the 152nd Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, Boughali noted that the post-World War II international system is facing growing challenges, including armed conflicts, declining trust in institutions, and a rapid technological change. He stressed that today's conflict, driven by poverty, marginalization, food insecurity, and environmental challenges, require a human security approach. Algeria, he said, believes the key challenge is not only managing crises, but restoring trust, reviving hope, and establishing real justice for current and future generations. Let's listen to Mr. Boughali.
Algeria believes that the real challenge facing the international community today lies not only in addressing crises, but also in rebuilding trust, reviving hope, and achieving genuine justice that benefits both current and future generations. This stems from the vision led by President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, which aims to strengthen international justice and rebuild trust in the multilateral system. This necessarily requires restoring the credibility and founding principles of the United Nations, foremost among them respect for international law, which must remain the framework governing relations between states without selectivity or double standards.
The Speaker of the Algerian Parliament reiterated on the occasion Algeria's support for just causes, particularly the Palestinian cause, and called for respect for international law without double standards, stressing its importance for the credibility of international institutions. He also condemned impunity for war crimes and criticized what he described as a serious violation of international humanitarian law affecting Palestinian detainees.
In line with Algeria's constant principles, our country affirms its commitment to defending just causes, foremost among them the Palestinian cause, and to working towards the implementation of international law. We also emphasize the necessity of holding accountable those responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity and curbing impunity in order to preserve the credibility of international justice. We condemn in the strongest words the so-called death penalty law against prisoners, which we consider a racist law, a grave violation of international humanitarian law, and a dangerous precedent. We call for its immediate condemnation and cessation, and for ensuring the protection of prisoners in accordance with established legal requirements.
It's worth noting that on the sidelines of the event, Mr. Boughali held bilateral talks with the Speaker of South Africa's National Assembly, Angela Thokozile Didiza, with whom he discussed ways to strengthen parliamentary cooperation, particularly through the exchange of expertise and visits between parliamentary delegations from both countries. The African Union has announced that Algeria maintained its position of first Vice President of the African Union of Broadcasting. The decision follows Algeria's unanimous appointment by the Union's Executive Council during its meeting held in the capital of the Gambia, Banjul. The unanimous renewal reflects recognition of Algeria's active role within the Union structures, as well as its ongoing contribution to supporting African media work and strengthening coordination among broadcasting institutions across the continent. The governor of the Bank of Algeria, Mohamed Lamine Lebou, has stressed in Washington the importance of financial policies to strengthen regulatory and prudential frameworks, closely monitor emerging risks, and work toward price stability. In a statement made during the 53rd meeting of the International Monetary and Financial Committee on behalf of Algeria, Ghana, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Libya, Morocco, Pakistan and Tunisia, Mr. Lebou said that strong international governance remains essential for the proper functioning of the global economy. Pope Leo XIV has begun the third leg of his African tour today in Angola. Earlier, the Pope concluded his 3 day visit to Cameroon with an open-air mass at Yaoundé Airport before flying to Luanda, the capital of Angola, where he is expected to deliver his first address to the authorities. Welcomed with popular enthusiasm in Cameroon, he is also expected to draw large crowds in Angola until his departure on Tuesday morning. Meanwhile, the digital weekly magazine Iqra, published by the Grand Mosque of Paris, dedicated its latest issue to Pope Leo XIV's official visit to Algeria, describing it as a historic and a symbol of coexistence and interfaith dialogue. In an article published by the magazine, the rector of the Grand Mosque of Paris, Shamsuddin Hafiz, who was present during the visit of Pope to Algeria, reflected on the Pope's trip and the warm welcome reserved to him in Algeria, highlighting the country's historical experiences and its culture of hospitality and coexistence. The National Secretariat of the Polisario Front has stressed that the United Nations remains the legitimate and practical framework for achieving a just and lasting solution to the conflict. The front once again called on the UN and its relevant bodies to fully assume their responsibilities in bringing an end to colonialism in Western Sahara. It reaffirmed the firm determination of the Sahrawi people to resist all attempts aimed at altering the international legal status of the Sahrawi question. And as Egypt says it relentlessly worked with Pakistan to reach a final agreement between the United States and Iran in the forthcoming days, Tehran has announced that it is regaining full control of the Strait of Hormuz. The commander of the Iranian armed forces, quoted by the state television as saying that the decision was taken in response to U.S. blockade of the strategic maritime route, while recalling that Iran had, in a gesture of goodwill, agreed to authorize a limited number of oil tankers and trade ships to cross the strait. In a similar move, the Iranian deputy foreign minister told newsmen outside a diplomatic forum held in Antalya, Turkey, that the United States could not impose a siege on the Strait of Hormuz at a time when Iran was striving to facilitate a safe crossing of the route. This came as international efforts were underway to try and pave the way for a de-escalation and allow for a final agreement to be reached by the US and Iran in the forthcoming days. In this respect, the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Army Chief of Staff announced having wound up separate visits to Iran and to other countries of the region to try and put an end to the conflict in the Middle East. The Pakistani Premier said discussions were held with the Iranian parliament speaker and the diplomacy chief ahead of a new round of discussions held or scheduled to take place soon. In this connection, the Iranian deputy foreign minister assured that no date has yet been set for the forthcoming U.S.-Iranian discussions. And in Lebanon, one blue helmet was today killed and 3 others were wounded in an ambush laid in the southern part of the country. The French soldiers were ambushed while on a mission carried out towards a position of the UN interim force in Lebanon, UNIFIL. The UN force called on the Lebanese authorities to look into those behind what it called the deliberate attack on its forces. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun firmly condemned the attack and pledged to punish those responsible for it. Earlier, the Lebanese president announced that preparations were underway for new negotiations aimed at consolidating the ceasefire and allow for the return of displaced people. A few days ago, a round of direct Israeli-Lebanese discussions, the first of the like, were held in Washington and resulted in the enforcement of a ceasefire. This came as the Israeli occupying army announced having set up a demarcation line in Lebanon's southern part, like in the Gaza Strip. About 2,300 people have been killed and more than 1 million others displaced since the Israeli forces launched their attack on Lebanon early this month. And the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor has condemned the Israeli occupation's construction of fortified military sites in the Gaza Strip, calling it a dangerous escalation and a step toward long-term control and possible annexation. The NGO said at least 20 military positions have been built near the so-called Yellow Line, which it says isolates about 55% of Gaza and places it under direct control, warning this is part of a broader policy of territorial consolidation. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has stressed that respect for international law matters more than ever. As he put it, violations are being committed before our eyes. Speaking at the International Court of Justice on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the UN's highest judicial body. Mr. Guterres recalled that last year the court issued a landmark environmental ruling urging states to combat climate change and open the door to preparations if they fail to comply. And finally, the UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher has warned that South Sudan is at risk of sliding into widespread famine and collapse as fighting intensifies and UN peacekeeping capacity declines. Miriam Bershi has more details.
Addressing the Security Council, the UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher described a worsening crisis marked by rising displacement, hunger, disease, and attacks on aid workers alongside shrinking funding, and urged immediate action to prevent catastrophe. The situation has deteriorated amid renewed clashes between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and opposition groups linked to Vice President Riek Machar, with civilians bearing the brunt. The head of the UN mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, Anita Kiki-Gbeo, also warned that the mission has lost 25 to 30% of its operational capacity due to budget constraints, even as needs on the ground grow more urgent. Meanwhile, UN investigators raised alarm over reports of human remains discovered in Jonglei State, highlighting the hidden human toll of escalating violence. The UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan cautioned that the true number of victims may be far higher, warning of possible mass graves and a broader collapse of the peace agreement, raising fears of renewed large-scale atrocities. The Commission called for urgent independent investigations, stressing the need to identify victims and ensure accountability in line with international law.
That's the end of our news bulletin. A reminder of the major headlines. The Speaker of the People's National Assembly, Ibrahim Bughali, has said in Istanbul, Turkey, that the current international context marked by overlapping crises requires reassessment of the foundations of the global system and stronger commitment to justice and peace, highlighting President Abdelmajid Tebboun's vision to strengthen international justice. As Egypt says it will relentlessly work with Pakistan to reach a final agreement between the United States and Iran in the forthcoming days, Tehran has announced that it is regaining full control of the Strait of Hormuz. And in Lebanon, one blue helmet was today killed and 3 others were wounded in an ambush laid in the southern part of the country. And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. We leave you now with our weekly program by my colleague Mariam Bershi. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin in English. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now. To travel back in time and learn about the most prominent events that marked human history, no need for a time machine. Echoes of Time with our colleague Mariam Bershi is your only address. A program broadcast to you every week on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to this new episode of Echoes of Time. Today we begin a short series dedicated to one of the most transformative currents in human history, the Enlightenment. Over the coming episodes, we will journey from Europe to America and finally to the Middle East, tracing how ideas of reason, liberty and progress reshaped societies and the human mind itself. Our first stop, Europe, where the dawn of a new age began to glow across the 17th and 18th centuries. Did not appear suddenly. It was born from centuries of questioning, a slow awakening after the long night of dogma and absolute rule. In the 60,000, Europe stood at a crossroads. The Renaissance had reignited curiosity, the scientific revolution had begun, to challenge the old order. Galileo, Descartes and Newton were defining or redefining truth, not as something decreed by authority, but as something discovered through reason and evidence. This new attitude toward knowledge marked a shift from faith to inquiry, from obedience to thought. It was a quiet rebellion, one waged not with weapons, but with words and ideas. By the early 18th centuries, the movement had a name, Les Lumières, the Enlightenment. In Paris, London, Berlin, and Edinburgh, a generation of thinkers emerged: Voltaire, Diderot, Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Kant, among others. They met in salons hosted by women of intellect and influence spaces where noblemen, artists, and scientists gathered to debate the meaning of liberty and justice. Here ideas crossed borders faster than armies. Voltaire's wit cut through superstition. Montesquieu analyzed power and balance, shaping modern concepts of constitutional government. Diderot assembled the encyclopedia, an audacious attempt to gather all human knowledge, to replace ignorance with learning. And Rousseau dared to proclaim that man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. For them reason was sacred. It was not the enemy of faith, but its equal, the faculty through which humanity might perfect itself. The Enlightenment was more than a philosophy. It was a project of emancipation. It sought to free humanity from fear of kings, of priests, of ignorance. Printing presses multiplied ideas. Pamphlets and treatises circulated through Europe's cafes and academies. Ordinary people, artisans, merchants, even farmers began to read about natural rights and social contracts. The idea that knowledge is power took on a new meaning. The educated mind could question, resist, and transform. But power never yields easily. Monarchs watched with both fascination and alarm as thinkers began to question divine authority. Some rulers, like Frederick the Great of Prussia or Catherine the Great of Russia, tried to adopt Enlightenment ideas without surrendering their thrones. They called themselves enlightened despots. Others silenced dissent from censorship or exile. Still, the spot could not be contained. Relationship with religion was complex. Many thinkers sought to reconcile reasons with belief, arguing that understanding the world was itself a form of reverence. But others, like Voltaire, turned their pens against the abuses of organized religion. His famous cry, "Écrasez l'infâme," or "Crush the infamous thing," referred not to faith itself, but to intolerance and fanaticism. This tension gave birth to deism, the idea of creator who designed the universe but allowed it to run according to natural laws. It was a compromise between science and spirituality, between Newton's physics and the Psalms of faith. At the heart of the Enlightenment lay a question that would reshape politics forever. What gives rulers the right to govern? John Locke in England argued that authority comes not from divine right, but from the consent of the governed. If a ruler violated that trust, the people had a right to resist. Jean-Jacques Rousseau expanded on that idea. He imagined a social contract where each individual, by surrendering a small part of freedom to the collective, gains protection and justice in return. It was a radical vision, one that would echo in revolutions and constitutions for centuries to come. Though male philosophers dominated the public stage, women played a crucial yet often forgotten role. Figures like Madame Geoffrin and Madame de Staël created intellectual spaces where dialogue thrived. Writers such as Mary Wollstonecraft, with her Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792, challenged the very foundation of social inequality. She argued that women's inferiority was not natural but constructed, the result of education denied. Her voice marked one of the earliest calls for gender equality, echoing through centuries of feminist thought. By the late 18th century, the Enlightenment had become more than a philosophy, it was a force. In France, its ideals initiated revolution. Liberty, equality, fraternity became a rallying cry against monarchy and privilege. In America, across the ocean, those same principles were about to inspire a new nation. The pens of Jefferson, Madison, and Franklin would translate European ideas into political reality. But within Europe itself, the Enlightenment's legacy remained complex, both glorious and tragic. It paved the way for democracy and human rights, but also for the arrogance of believing that reason alone could solve every problem. Still, its impact endures in every modern constitution, in every classroom, in every scientific experiment, and in the very notion of progress. In Europe was above all a conversation between past and future, between faith and